$7.43. That's what my grandson had left in his savings account. 11 years of birthday money, Christmas gifts, and every $5 bill he'd ever earned helping neighbors rake leaves or shovel snow, gone. And he didn't even know it yet. I found out because he asked me to help him check. He was 11 years old, sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of milk and a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich, and he said, "Grandpa, can you look at my bank app? Mom said she'd help me, but she keeps forgetting, and I want to buy something for my birthday." He slid the tablet across to me like it was nothing, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. I looked at the screen, I looked at the balance, and I sat very still for a moment, the way you do when something hits you so hard that your body hasn't caught up to your brain yet. $7.43. His name is Cooper. He'll be 12 in March. He saves everything, he always has, even as a little kid. Used to keep his coins in an old coffee tin on his dresser. When his father and I helped him open his first real savings account at a credit union 2 years ago, he had over $600 in that tin. 612, to be exact. He counted it out himself 3 times at the kitchen table. Proud as anything. The account had grown from there. He got $50 for his birthday from his aunt. 20 from a neighbor after a particularly bad blizzard. His father had set up the account so that Cooper's name was listed as the minor account holder, and his mother, my daughter-in-law, Serena, was listed as the authorized adult on the account. Standard setup. She could make deposits, withdrawals, routine stuff for a kid's account. I scrolled through the transaction history. My hand went cold. There were 22 withdrawals over the past 14 months. None of them were labeled birthday gift. None of them were labeled anything. They were just numbers. For 40 here, 60 there, 80 in November, 120 in February. Steady as a drumbeat, taken out in cash from an ATM, always on weekdays, always between noon and 2 in the afternoon, always when my son was at work. I set the tablet face down on the table and looked at Cooper. He was talking about a model train set he'd seen online, he'd been saving up. He thought he had enough. "How much is the set?" I asked. $289, he said. "But with shipping it's like $310. I figured I had plenty." I nodded slowly. "Let me make some calls, bud. I'll figure it out." He smiled and went back to his sandwich. I excused myself to the back porch and stood in the November cold for a long time, staring at the yard. My son's name is Patrick. He's 34, works in commercial HVAC, leaves the house by 6 every morning and usually doesn't get back until after 5. He married Serena 8 years ago. I'll be honest, I had reservations. Not because of anything specific, not at first. Just a feeling. She was charming in a way that felt rehearsed. She laughed at exactly the right moments. She remembered every detail about everyone, but in a way that seemed like information gathering rather than genuine interest. Patrick loved her completely. He would have walked through fire for that woman. Still would have, right up until the moment I showed him what she'd done. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Cooper is their son. He's also the best thing in my life since my wife Loretta passed 4 years ago. That kid is sharp and gentle and funny in the way that 11-year-olds are before the world gets to them. He builds model ships. He knows every U.S. president in order. He once told me that his favorite historical period was the Civil War, because the letters people wrote back then were so real, Grandpa. They said exactly what they felt. I thought about that, standing on my porch in the cold. I went inside and called my neighbor Dennis. He's retired from the county sheriff's office, been a friend of mine for 20 years. I didn't tell him everything. I just asked him to explain to me exactly how an authorized adult on a minor's savings account works, legally. What rights they had. What it would take to document a pattern of misuse. He was quiet for a moment. "You find something," he said. "I don't know yet," I said. "I want to be sure before I say anything." "Smart," he said. "Don't move yet. Document first." That was a Thursday. I didn't call Patrick that night. I wanted to badly. I picked up the phone twice and put it down. Because here's the thing about calling your son when you think his wife has been stealing from your grandson. You only get one shot at it. If you're wrong, you've damaged something that can't be fully repaired. And if you're right, and you go in half-cocked with nothing but a screenshot and a feeling, she'll have time to cover it. Delete the app. Move money around. Come up with an explanation that sounds reasonable at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night when Patrick is tired from a 10-hour shift and wants to believe his wife. I'd seen it happen, not in my own family, but I'd seen it. The way people can talk their way out of a corner if they have enough warning. So I waited. Friday morning I drove to the credit union. I explained that I was Cooper's grandfather and that I was concerned about activity on his account. The woman at the desk was kind. She explained that without being a listed account holder, there were limits to what she could share with me. But she told me this much: if I believed a minor's account was being misused, I could request that a formal review be initiated, and that would create a record. I asked her what I needed to bring in. She handed me a list. I drove home and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The transaction history I'd photographed on my phone: 14 months of withdrawals, 22 transactions, a total of just over $2,300. $2,300 from an 11-year-old boy's savings account. I thought about the coffee tin. I thought about him counting those coins. I called Dennis back. By the following Monday, I had a folder. Not a dramatic folder, not a lawyer's briefcase, just a manila folder from the dollar store with a rubber band around it. But inside that folder was a printed copy of every transaction I'd photographed, a timeline I'd written out by hand, and 2 other pieces of information Dennis had helped me locate through public record searches. The first was a name. A man named Ray. I won't use his last name, who Serena had apparently been seeing for some time. He worked at a gym in the next town. Dennis found him through a connection on social media that Serena hadn't thought to make private. The second was a pattern. 12 of the 22 withdrawals happened within 48 hours of charges on a restaurant and entertainment app that Serena used. Charges that appeared on a shared family account Patrick had access to but rarely checked. I'd asked Patrick once, casually, if Serena had her own spending money, and he'd said yes. Of course, she had her own checking account for personal things. She did, but she wasn't using it. She was using Cooper's. I sat at the table with that folder, and I felt something settle over me. Not anger exactly. Anger had come and gone over the weekend. What I felt now was colder than anger, more deliberate. My grandson had saved $612 in a coffee tin. He'd counted it 3 times. He was going to use it to buy a model train set, and he had $7.43 left. I picked up the phone and called Patrick. I asked him to meet me for lunch on Tuesday. I didn't tell him what it was about. I said I wanted to see him, that I had some things to show him, that he should come without Serena. He was a little puzzled. "Is everything okay, Dad?" And I said, "Yes, everything's fine. Just come." He came. We sat in a corner booth at a diner I'd been going to since before Patrick was born. I ordered coffee. He ordered the turkey melt, and I slid the folder across the table. He opened it, read through the first page, stopped, went back to the top and read it again more slowly. The color left his face. "Dad," he said. And then he didn't say anything else for a while. I let him sit with it. I didn't push. I'd planned to stay calm no matter what he said, and I did, but it cost me something. Watching your son understand something like that, watching the moment it lands, is not something you forget. He asked me how I found out. I told him about the tablet, about Cooper asking me to check his balance, about that number, 743, sitting there on the screen. Patrick put his hand flat on the table. He stared at it. "He thinks he has enough for the train set," he said quietly. "He thinks he has plenty," I said. Neither of us spoke for a minute. Then Patrick said, "How long have you had this?" "Since Thursday. You waited 4 days. I wanted to be thorough," I said. I didn't want to walk in with half a story. He nodded slowly. I could see him working through it. He's not impulsive, Patrick. Never has been. He gets that from Loretta. He processes things quietly, thoroughly, and then he acts. "Is there more?" he asked. I showed him the second part of the folder. The timeline. The restaurant charges. The name. He closed the folder and set it flat on the table and put his hands over it, like he was trying to hold it down. "I need a few days," he said. "Take what you need," I said. "Cooper is safe. He's at school. He's fine. She doesn't know we know." Patrick looked at me across that diner table, and I saw something in his face that I hadn't seen since he was a small boy. A kind of raw, unguarded hurt, the kind you can't perform. He was heartbroken. He was furious. He was figuring out how to be both at once. "Does Cooper know?" he asked. "No," I said. And I didn't tell him anything about the balance. Just said I was looking into it. "Good," he said. He pressed his hands flat on the folder again. "Okay, good." Patrick moved carefully. "That's what I want you to understand." He didn't go home that night and blow everything up. He consulted a family law attorney the next morning. A woman in town who'd been recommended to him by a guy on his crew whose own divorce had gone sideways. He walked in with the folder and walked out 2 hours later with a plan. The attorney told him something I want to repeat here because I think it matters. She said, Moving money from a minor's custodial savings account without documented consent or a legitimate purpose is legally considered misappropriation of funds in most states. And if it can be demonstrated that the pattern was sustained and deliberate, it can be treated as financial abuse of a child. Financial abuse of a child. I'd turned that phrase over in my head 100 times since I first heard it, because that's what it was. Cooper hadn't chosen Serena as his custodian. He'd never had a chance to say no. He was 11 years old with a coffee tin full of saved-up birthday money, and she'd reached into that account 22 times over 14 months and helped herself. Patrick filed for divorce 9 days after our lunch. He also filed a separate complaint with the county regarding the misuse of the custodial account. The attorney helped him document it correctly, every transaction, every date, the full history. It went to the right place. I won't detail all of it here because some of it is still ongoing, but I'll say this. When the bank's fraud department and a court-appointed financial guardian both reviewed the account records, the picture was not ambiguous. There was also the matter of Ray. I won't spend much time on him. He's not really the story. He was a symptom of something, the way these things usually are. Patrick confronted that quietly through the attorney as part of the legal proceedings. It came out. It always does. I want to tell you about the Thursday after Patrick filed. Serena had moved out by then. She'd gone to stay with her sister in Raleigh, which is about 4 hours from us. Cooper was with Patrick. He was confused and sad in the way kids are when their world changes shape. Not broken, just disoriented. He was asking questions. Patrick was doing his best to answer honestly without loading a kid with more than he could carry. I went over that Thursday evening. Patrick ordered pizza. Cooper and I sat on the living room floor and started working on one of his model ships, a small schooner he'd been building in stages for a few months. We didn't talk about any of it. We just worked on the ship, sorted the pieces, checked the instruction sheet. At some point, without looking up from the hull he was fitting together, Cooper said, "Grandpa, is the bank stuff figured out?" I said, "Getting there, bud." He nodded, kept working. "Dad said I'll be okay," he said. "You will be," I said. He was quiet for another minute. Then he said, "I kind of knew something was wrong. With the money, I just didn't know how to say it out loud." I didn't say anything for a moment. I set down the piece I was holding and I looked at my grandson, this 11-year-old boy with his careful hands and his Civil War letters and his coffee tin full of saved-up coins. And I thought about all the months that had passed while he carried that quiet knowing around inside him, not sure who to tell or how. "You said it fine," I said. "You asked me to check. That was enough." He looked up then, smiled a little, went back to the ship. The model train set Cooper wanted was $310 with shipping. Patrick bought it for his birthday. Set it up in the basement on a 4x8 sheet of plywood, the way I'd set up my own train set when Patrick was Cooper's age. Cooper spent the better part of a Saturday arranging the track, the little buildings, the signal lights. He is meticulous about it, the way he is meticulous about everything. I watched him from the bottom of the stairs. He didn't know yet all of what had happened. He knew his parents were separating. He knew there had been a problem with his account that the grown-ups were working on. He knew that his grandfather had found something when he checked his balance and that things had gotten serious from there. At one point, he looked up and saw me standing at the foot of the stairs. "Grandpa," he said, "come look at this part. I put the water tower next to the depot. Is that right?" I went over and looked. "That's exactly right," I said. It was. I am 63 years old. I lost my wife 4 years ago. I have one son and one grandson, and a neighbor named Dennis who drinks bad coffee and knows things about public records that have turned out to be very useful. I have a manila folder in my filing cabinet and a photograph on my phone of a bank balance that still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. I also have Thursday evenings on the living room floor with a half-built model schooner and a boy who knows how to ask for help even when he doesn't quite have the words for what's wrong. My daughter-in-law made 22 withdrawals from my grandson's savings account over 14 months. She used that money for herself, on herself, for a life she was building in secret, while Patrick worked 60-hour weeks, and Cooper went to school and saved everything he ever earned in a coffee tin on his dresser. The legal process is not finished. These things take time. But the account has been frozen pending resolution of the complaint. A court-appointed guardian now oversees Cooper's finances. Patrick is working with his attorney on restitution as part of the proceedings. Whether Serena faces criminal charges is still a matter being determined. I'll say only that the evidence is documented, and the authorities are aware. What I know is this. Cooper asked me to check something because he trusted me. Not because he fully understood what was wrong. He's 11. He shouldn't have to understand that. But because something felt off, and I was the person he reached for. I've thought a lot about what would have happened if I hadn't looked carefully. If I'd just said, "I'll have your dad help you with that later," and handed the tablet back. If I'd been distracted or in a hurry, or if Cooper hadn't asked at all because he figured it was a grown-up thing and he shouldn't bother anyone with it. $7.43. That's what was left. Pay attention to the small things the kids in your life show you. They don't always have language for what they're carrying. Sometimes they hand you a tablet and ask a simple question, and what they're really doing is trusting you to look. Look, that's all it takes. Just look.